Hello everyone, good day. Welcome to vSparks. Today we are going to see the concepts of scheduling pods to the nodes using NodeName and NodeSelector constraints. We are also going to see a demo on the same as well. If you like this video, please subscribe to vSparks channel and click the bell icon for the latest updates. This is the agenda of this video. We are going to discuss on these topics in this video. Let us first try to understand the working nature of Kubernetes Scheduler. Whenever you deploy your application, it is the default scheduler that will automatically do a reasonable placement of pods in the worker nodes. By default, the scheduler will spread your pods across the nodes in such a way that the node resources like CPU and memory will be sufficient enough to run the node itself. This means that the scheduler distributes the workloads across the worker nodes in a balanced manner. You can constrain this default scheduling behavior so that the pods can run on a particular set of nodes. There are several ways to do this, which we are going to see in the upcoming slides. All these methods which we are going to see uses node labels to facilitate the node selection. Like other Kubernetes objects, nodes have labels. By default, Kubernetes populates default standard labels on all the nodes in the cluster. For example, the host name, CPU architecture type, etc. etc. You can also attach your custom labels on the nodes manually as per your convenience. In this case, I have attached a custom label called color. But why we are doing this? Why we need to schedule pods on a particular set of nodes? We will discuss the same in the next slide. Why different worker nodes? We are scheduling pods in a particular set of nodes in order to achieve certain level of isolation, security, and to offload worker nodes in running huge software libraries. Let us take an example. As you all know, every worker node in the Kubernetes cluster has a container runtime installed to it. Along with it, the administrator will also install certain packages and libraries to it so that the containers running on top of it will be using those packages and libraries. In this example, worker node 0 and worker node 1 has installed with Python libraries, whereas the worker node 2 has installed with Java libraries. Whenever we are deploying pods, which is going to run our Python application, we should always choose only worker node 0 or worker node number 1. This is because only worker node 0 and worker node 1 has Python libraries installed to it. When you try to run a Java application in worker node 1, it will fail because worker node 1 has no Java libraries installed to it. The same will run in worker node number 2 because it has Java libraries installed to it. This kind of node selection for your applications is purely based on the labels that is present in the node. This kind of scheduling pods in specific nodes guarantees certain level of isolation between the worker nodes, and also it eliminates the need to install all the required libraries in all the available nodes. If you install multiple libraries or packages in all the nodes, every node will be loaded with bunch of software packages which will greatly reduce the efficiency of the particular nodes. There are basically three ways to schedule the pods into the nodes using labels. First is using the node name field. Second is using the node selector field. And the third is using affinity constraints. We should use or configure these entities in the Kubernetes YAML definition in order to make it work. Let us see how one by one. Scheduling the pods to nodes using node name. As you see in this picture, every node in the cluster will be having certain labels for its identification. These labels can be predefined by the Kubernetes itself, or it can be custom user-defined label. For this method of scheduling, while defining your pod definition, we must mention the node name field along with the host name of the node. So this host name label is a predefined label by the Kubernetes in all the nodes. So in this case, I have given the node name as worker0, which means the pod scheduling will happen only in worker node number 0. This method of scheduling pods to nodes using node name is a more direct form of node selection than the other methods, and it takes the precedence than the other methods. Once you apply this pod definition, this pod will be scheduled in worker node number 0. This is as per the definition file. In this way, you can schedule pods into a specific node using node name field. There will be some limitations in this method of scheduling, some of which are: though many nodes are available in the cluster, scheduler will schedule the workloads only in a particular node. If that named node does not exist or it does not have enough resources, pods will not run and it will fail. Scheduler will not try to run these pods in the other nodes. In the case of cloud-based environments, the node names are not always static. The next method of scheduling the pods is using NodeSelector. NodeSelector is the simplest and recommended form of node selection constraint. In this method, you should add the NodeSelector field to your pod specification. Under this field, specify the node labels you want the target node to have. Here, in this case, we have added custom labels to our nodes. If you see here, the worker node 0 and worker node 1 are labeled with worker type equals blue, whereas the worker node number 2 is labeled with worker type equals green. Once you apply this pod definition, these pods will be scheduled either in worker node 0 or in worker node number 1. This is because the node labels matches exactly with the node selector field. That is, worker type equals blue is our node selector field. The same is mapping with our label. One advantage while using node selector is that in this node selector field, you can mention single label as well as multiple labels. The scheduler will match nodes for scheduling the pods only when the nodes satisfy all the labels under the node selector field. The last method is using the affinity constraints. We will be discussing these topics in a separate video. Now let us see a demo on how to schedule the pods using node name and node selector constraints. Let us see the demo case by case. First case, we will see how to schedule the pods using node name. Step number 1, access the Kubernetes cluster using kubectl utility and check if the Kubernetes cluster is running properly. Just to save the time, I have consolidated all the commands in a notepad and the same is available in the video description. This is our master node where I have connected to the Kubernetes cluster using the command line. So this cluster info command gives the details of your cluster. Now check the nodes and the pods. Our cluster is running with one master and two worker nodes. Just check if all the control plane components are running in the kube system namespace. Yep, all the components are running. Now, step number 2, create and modify the pod manifest using NodeName field. We are going to schedule the pod in worker node number 2. Use this command to create a pod manifest and modify the YAML file as per our requirements. Now the pod manifest is created. Just remove all the unwanted lines. Now we should know where to place the node name field. We can check the YAML schema of the Kubernetes objects using this kubectl explain command. Now we have explained the pod schema. Just check the field spec, which is the sub element of the pod object. Here you can see all the fields that can be present under spec. Here you can see node name, which is one of the field under spec. So by now you should know where to place this node name field in the pod definition. That is under spec you should define it. Now give the value for your node name, which is going to be worker node number 2. Ensure to use the node name and the other fields in the same level of spacing. The value of the node name should be worker node number 2, and so this pod will be scheduled only in worker node number 2. Step number 3, create the pod using the manifest file. As per the pod definition, the pod will be created only in worker node number 2 and not in worker node number 1. Just do a dry run to validate the pod definition file. Now the dry run is successful. Now apply the same without dry run. Now you can see the pod is created only in worker node number 2. Our first use case to schedule the pods using node name field is successful. Just delete these resources in order to make it clean for our next use case. It's done. Now case number 2, we will see how to schedule pods using NodeSelector. Step number 1, access and inspect the Kubernetes cluster. We can ignore this step as we did it already in case number 1. Step number 2, we are going to add custom labels to the nodes. In this case, I'm going to add custom label called worker type equals blue. Before adding the labels, just ensure the same label exists already or not. Our custom label is not present in the nodes. Now just add the labels to both the nodes and cross-verify the same. We have added the custom labels in both the worker nodes. Step number 3, create and modify the pod manifest using the NodeSelector constraint. Here we are going to use the custom label worker type equals blue for the NodeSelector constraint. I'm going to use the same way as like our case 1 to define the YAML manifest file. Now our manifest file is created. Just remove all the unwanted lines from the manifest. I have removed all the unwanted lines. Now just go back to the kubectl explain command to see the syntax of the pod definition again. Here you can see the node selector should be mentioned in a map data type under spec. Group of key value pairs is called as map. It is one of the data type. Here the key and the value must be mentioned in a string. That's how the syntax is defined here. Here under spec, we should mention the node selector field. Beneath the node selector field, we must mention the labels. We have already labeled the nodes. Just fetch the custom labels from the nodes. So here the custom label is worker type equals blue. So now I'm using the label worker type equals blue under the node selector field. Step number 4, apply the pod definition so that the pod will be created either in worker node number 0 or in worker node number 1 using the node selector constraint. Before applying, ensure to validate the definition using dry run. Yeah, our dry run is successful. Now apply the same. Now the pod is created. Our pod should be created either in worker node number 1 or in worker node number 2. Our pod is created in worker node number 1. Well, that's it for this lecture. This is the summary that we have discussed so far in this video. Thank you from vSparks and thank you for watching this video.